Welcome to this little YouTube video. What I intend to do is demonstrate how I'm going to rescue this portrait using only the tools available in Lightroom. This is as imported. Photograph is taken in a studio session when we were setting up and the lighting isn't really right and there's a lot of shadow, and I just feel that I think it has potential, and I'm going to demonstrate what we can do with Lightroom alone. So to start off, well, the first thing is I'm going to change the profile. This is really a key starting point. So I'm going to go over here in the develop module, and you can see that the default profile assigned by Adobe is Adobe Color. It used to be Adobe Standard, which is slightly flatter and less contrasty, and I think this is probably the reason Adobe have changed this. Is there was a lot of criticism. People would look at vibrant photos on their camera and then bring them into Lightroom and they would look dull and flat. But duller and flatter is going to help with what I have in mind for this. So in fact, I'm actually going to use a profile Adobe Neutral. The full range of profiles, if you click that little icon, full range of profiles are available. There's the color ones, and we've got Adobe profiles, and we've got camera matching profiles, as they're called. Now, the one that I want to use is this Adobe Neutral, which, as you can see, is a much flatter profile, and I think you can already see the sort of way I'm going to go with this portrait. So yeah, profiles are a more fundamental thing than presets. They're not like presets. If I close that, so we've got our neutral profile, none of the development sliders are moved at all. There's been no other manipulation of this image. If I was to go to presets, and these are the standard Lightroom presets here, let's close those down. If I pick one of those, if we say, well, let's pick natural, you can see what has happened. It has reverted to a flatter profile, but we've got all this going on. The various manipulations, vibrance has been increased, contrast has been increased, which I really don't want. Highlights have been brought down. So you can see the thing. So this does more to the image than just change the profile. So let's go back to our natural profile, this flatter image. And what are we going to do? Well, I think actually even with that, the image requires a little bit of an exposure boost. So I could use shadows, because it really is predominantly shadows I want to boost, but it's really not having much of an effect on the face here. You know, it's maybe helping a little bit, but it is brightening the background. Not worried about that. We can deal with that later. I think exposure is probably the more important thing, but I find I'm using exposure more in the current editions of Lightroom than I did in the past. Because of the weakening of the shadow tool, I'm having to up the exposure. I'm going to take it somewhere about there, and then I'm going to bring the highlights down, because that is the effect I want. So I'm going to bring the highlights down to, take it down a fair bit, somewhere about there. That is the global adjustments. So let's see where we are. So original image, and now we've got a much flatter image, which I think is much more flattering to the model. Next step is quite a few local adjustments, and I think the first thing I want to do here is I want to bring up the eyes, because this model has lovely blue eyes and we're just not catching them. The key light was on her right, which means that really her hair is causing some of this loss of light across the face. So we will do that. So exposure I'm going to do, and I'm going to bump up, and I'm going to do the eyes separately. So normally I start somewhere around about 1/3 of a stop for the eyes. So let's zoom in, small brush, and now auto mask I'll keep on, and The feather was at 50, which is sort of the default value. Flow and density keep to 100. The joy of the brush tool in Lightroom is that the strength can be changed after the events using the sliders here for whatever you are applying. So we've got flexibility. I don't have to lay it down in layers. I can control the amount of exposure, increase or decrease here. I don't need to control it in a brush-like manner that I maybe would with the dodge and burn tool in Photoshop. So just on the eye, third of a stop, increase in brightness, and we can turn that on and off. So not a marked increase in brightness. I'm going to click on a new tool because I want to be able to control the two eyes separately, because this eye being behind the hair is in shadow a lot more. So I'm going to just bring that up a little more, about around 50 there, just to balance the eyes. Okay, now we're not done with the eyes yet, because the other thing I want to do is I want to put some more sparkle in the irises. So to do that, I will use the Iris Enhance tool. Now that increases saturation, boosting the colour in the eye, and increases clarity slightly. I'm going to take the clarity up a bit further, around about 25. Saturation I will leave there. We have a little bit of an exposure boost, but the other little thing that I like to do in the eye is use temperature and tint to give the colour a little bit of help, and in this case the model's eyes are blue, so I'm going to bring the just very slight change in the colour temperature towards the blue, so you know, -7 or 8, 9, somewhere around there, and then small brush and just brush it onto the iris, and you can see it's just popping a little bit more blue in the eye. Subtle, but just a little boost that it requires. It can even boost the saturation up a little bit. If I take the temperature any further, it gets a wee bit ridiculous. So that's why I say got to be very gentle, gentle with the blue there. And again, let's turn. What have we done to the eyes? Okay, we've got them standing out a bit now. I want to show, to take this, because yeah, we're just going to erase a little bit of that where we've gone a little bit too far over the margin of the eye, and just there as well, just take that to the edge of the lower eyelid. Okay, so yep, I'm pretty happy with what we've done there so far. Now, my other problem is that between makeup, hair, and you know, the nature of the lighting, there's some shadow around the eye here. So again, I'm going to go up to the brush tool, on the new brush tool, and say really what I want to do is lift the shadows, but the shadow, we'll do that. We'll go on there, we'll go on shadows, and we're plus 16, and I'm just going to paint that in with a brush that just covers that darker area, and I can change the brush on the fly here, and I'm just going to go right round that area. Just make sure I've got that. One of the things to do is be careful that you don't hit on the little controller and you can move that whole brush over. Don't want to do that, but that's where the history tool is your friend. If you do that, you can always go back in the history, get back to where you were. So you can see where we have, where I've painted that. So that's pretty good, but it hasn't made an awful lot of difference. Raised it just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in, got that still activated, I'm just going to add a little exposure increase, very slight, somewhere about just there. So again, that's nice. So the next thing I want to do is actually I want to apply, I think, a similar amount of brightening to the shadow along the right side of her face and maybe the right eye socket as well. So I'm going to click New. I'm going to put that back to where we were, 0.14. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draw in here along this shadow and down the side of the face, and I'm going to lift that shadow there, and then I'm going to take that around the eye here, reduce that down and just go there. Now again, I want to have a little look at how that is appearing. Do I have anything not where I want it? And yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So let's zoom out there a bit and see. So let's click done on that to get rid of those dots. So there's where we've got. So we've gone from that to that so far. Now you could nearly say we're done. What we do, we have a few stray hairs and things. I'm not going to do those in this video because I mean that's just simple cloning out, and I think it's better done on Facebook. But there's a few more things I'm going to do in this portrait to really boost it. So the first thing is I took this with a very sharp lens, the Sony 90mm 2.8 macro, and it's incredibly sharp, and it has shown up every little detail in the skin, which is really, for a studio beauty shot, that's just far too much. Now, normally, in the past, I've used various techniques in Photoshop, but in the last couple of manifestations of Lightroom, a new tool has been added here under Presence, which is texture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that because I believe that we're going to brush it in and use it in a brush. There it is there, and I'm going to bring it down to about -60. I'm going to use this quite. It seems like quite a lot, but I think this works exceptionally well. I believe that actually this was developed by Adobe intentionally as a skin softening tool. I don't know why they sort of rebranded it as texture. It certainly, in a positive direction, can be used in architectural shots to bring up detail in stone and concrete, which I've used it there. But in this case, it is a really excellent tool for skin softening without spending ages in Lightroom, and you can see immediately the effect that it's having on the skin here. So I'm using the same brush, a feather of 50, and I'm going to brush in on the skin. I'm going to avoid the eyes. I'm going to go close to the eyes. I'm going to go into the eye socket. So you see again that this is helping with those shadows. And we're going to bring it down, and you can see the effect on the skin. Now, this is a matter of taste. In a straight portrait, you maybe don't want to do this, but in a beauty shot for competition photography or whatever, I think this is an excellent way of producing a much more appealing look. And again, it is also helping with the excessive contrast. So we can have a look at that, and I can see where I'm missing. Now I'm going to bring this down onto the darker part of her neck, which is in shade. We'll come right down. I'll work on that in a moment. Right down on the edge here, and just for fine detail, I'll bring up the mask and check where I am, and am I where I want to be, anywhere I don't want to be, and I'm missing out the lower eyelids. You can come up here. I'm missing out really the eyes, eyelids. I'll come back to that later. Missing out the mouth, the lips, which I want to remain sharp. Let's move our window down, and I'll just bring this down here. Now, the shoulder. I also want to soften the skin on the shoulder, but I want to do something else with the shoulder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a new brush and I'm going to do the shoulder separately. I'm going to keep the texture down, but I'm also going to bring the highlights down because her shoulder is very bright. It's more in the light. It's not being in the shade from her hair, and so it's brighter than her face. So I'm going to bring the highlights down a good bit, about 30 or so, we'll see. Again, this can be adjusted after the event. Maybe with that, need a little bit of exposure down as well, somewhere about there. And the thing that I do is with skin is I will use the temperature control, and again I will give a little nudge up on the temperature, somewhere around 8 or 9. And the reason I do that is that, like the dodge and burn tool, reducing the texture tends to produce a muddiness and a greyness. If you do it too much, reducing the highlights tends to introduce grey and make things look a bit muddy. And so therefore I move the temperature up into the warm range and paint that in with, let me take that off, paint that in with the decrease in the exposure or the highlights, and you can see I'm darkening, but the skin tone with that little bit of warmth in the skin is also balancing better with the colour in the neck and the colour of the makeup on the face. So that is what I will do with the shoulder. So again, let's go out a bit and see what's happening. Now, doesn't that look better already? So what else am I going to do? Well, the next thing I will do is I'm going to go back and pay a little bit more attention to the eyes. So let's zoom in again, and this time I am going to add a little bit of local sharpness. There we are there, sharpness. Now the other thing I like to add with the sharpness is a little bit of clarity. That's going to help boost the just the appearance and sharpness of the eyes. I haven't added any global sharpening to this image. As I say, it was taken with a very sharp lens, and therefore I don't really feel the need to add global sharpening or add in, which will contribute to noise. I want to keep that to minimum, but I am going to make sure that the eyes are sharp, although with the eye autofocus on the Sony camera, the focus has been absolutely spot on the eyes. So I'm drawing in a little bit of clarity and a little bit of sharpness along the margin of, just on the eyelashes, the margin of the eye, just like that, and again on the other side. Now I want to do a similar thing on the lips, but I also want to add in a little bit of saturation, because what I want to do is I want to strengthen the red just a little bit on the lipstick, and so we have that. Maybe actually bring the sharpness down on the lips, don't want to overdo it. There we go. Let's have a look again. Adjustments off, adjustments on. Now any of those that maybe are not exactly spot on, we can go back and check. I might just extend a little bit of that softness to that upper lid, just to soften that as well. And here on this side, very gently, just in there. And make sure we're in here. So then we can have a look and see. Yep, I think that's good. So there is that. So what else do I need to do? Now, in this image, I have completely ignored the hands. If I was going to include the hands in the final image, which I'm not, I'm going to crop it down, I would use the same settings as for the shoulder. I would decrease the highlights, I would add the softening with the reduced texture, and a little bit of warmth on the hands as well to match what I've done on the shoulder. But to be honest, what I want to do here, let's get out of our local controls, is I'm going to crop this image down to keep the hands out but keep the hairline in. And I personally like this sort of framing for a portrait. Now, the one other thing is to add a vignette. And again, I don't use, there's a vignette tool in Lightroom. I hardly ever use that. I will go back to the local adjustments and pick the radial filter and draw in here. Now I've got to change the settings because we're on texture, exposure, and I want to reduce the exposure down. Maybe even bring shadows down. See, it has very little effect. Really very little effect now. Even highlights will probably have a greater, more noticeable effect on the surroundings. So the idea of this filter is that the center is excluded and the changes are applied outside. If you want to apply the changes centrally, you invert the mask. Simple as that. So I want to extend that, maybe take that out a little bit, and then I'm going to rotate that and move it down. Just want to make sure where we are in relation to her hair. And that is the other thing that I will do before we finish. I'm just going to take that feather down a little bit just to extend that. And bring that out a touch. So let's have a look at that. Turn that on and off. That's it off. That's it on. So with that tool, I can center the vignette where I want it and shape it appropriate to the subject and the areas that I want it to affect. So that is done. But the one thing I didn't do earlier, which I will do very quickly, again going back onto the brush and coming back to, yes, we're on texture, but this time I'm going to put the texture up, and I am going to add in about half as much clarity, and then I'm going to paint that into the hair. Let me turn the overlay off here. So there we go, and you can see that that's just having a little gentle increase in the definition of the hair. So there we have it, a completed portrait processing, all done in Lightroom. Now, the next steps that I would do with this is, if I wanted to do a little bit of spotting now, at this sort of size, it's really not terribly necessary, but there are a few little skin blemishes that I would spot out. That's a lot easier to do in Photoshop. And I would just flip the image over into Photoshop and finish off. The other thing that I would do, well, maybe we'll do that. Let's just do that because it's very quick. So right click, edit in, Adobe Photoshop 2020, and that will quickly open, and it will open our image. Okay, so we've got the crop and we've got the vignette already, but that's okay. It doesn't. It isn't going to be a problem to what we're going to do. So what do I want to do? Do a little bit of spotting. I'll go on to the forward and just the spotting. I mean, you can use any of these tools. Some people advocate using this tool here, where you set your source, area. I just find this is fine. If it doesn't work absolutely, then I can sorry, hit the wrong key. I would just go and take that wee thing there off. Don't like that wee line there. We can take that. Another little line there. It's something like this little crease. I would be inclined to use this other tool where I can set with the Alt key the source and then just paint over that to take that out. Go back to the other thing here on the nose. A little dark area in there. A few wee things. You get the idea. So that's that. And the other thing I was going to do, let's go back to fit on screen. The other thing I wanted to do was with the crop tool, because what I feel I would quite like to do here is rotate a little bit, but I want to fill in. Now I can crop that off. We're going to get a little bit of complexity here, but this is a wonderfully powerful thing. So click OK, and get this, and there we go, and it's actually even filled in the cardigan. And file, save, and we are back with our completed image in Lightroom, and that's it. Image done. So we have gone from, let me see, where did we go, because these are now out of order. So we have gone from, is it that one? Yeah, we have gone from that to that. So I think that's a pretty nice portrait now from something that didn't really look so nice. So there you have it. A few tricks and tips, and showing just the power that there is in Adobe Lightroom. Okay, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.